Hey, good morning. Epigenetics shows how trauma can be passed down from generation to generation through your DNA, meaning I didn't have to be present to witness the trauma firsthand in order to see how my DNA expresses that trauma. Now, we've seen how whites' superiority disorder and enslavement changed the physiological and mental makeup of the bodies of Southeast Asians, the Irish, Black Aboriginals, Black Africans, Black African Americans, and Latinos. We've seen these things through epigenetics. But what we haven't looked at is how epigenetics affects white people. How their superiority disorder and being on the other end of enslavement still affects them today. If we took a look at that, we would understand these Karens and Tads of today just a little bit better. You see, their needs to stop non-white people to demand that they show them their papers. Who are you? What are you doing here? You don't belong here. Their need for that happens because they are the continuation of the legacy of slave patrollers. That's what they did. You see, they gave themselves the authority to stop, frisk, and question any non-white person they came into contact with. And they still do it today. Looking at this thing critically, we understand that white men suffering from whites' superiority disorder wrote the laws of this country. Laws that uphold the belief in whites' superiority disorder. Like laws that maintain slavery still exists in this country as a form of punishment for anyone convicted of a crime. Or the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that needs to be repealed every so often. Otherwise, it takes us back to the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which was overturned in 1883. You see, those who wrote the laws that hold this country together did so using racist language. And that language shows us the primary functions of whiteness. Number one is to exclude. Can't nobody be white but white people, and even then, certain white people ain't white. Two, whiteness is all-consuming. It consumes your identity, your culture, your ethnicity, your land. Whiteness consumes everything, and then it reduces it down to the bare minimum and replaces it with something mediocre. A prime example of that is hip-hop. What used to be a vibrant, thriving cultural movement was then co-opted by the whites and has now been reduced to a little more than mediocre rappers. And today, in 2022, this video cannot be played in certain states because politicians who suffer from whites' superiority disorder have passed laws banning this type of conversation. That's why these historically accurate conversations are important, so that information like this is never forgotten.
So I propose a theory. What if white people are not experiencing trauma through epigenetics, but their actions of domestic terrorism and torture and violence is what travels through epigenetics for them? Hear me out. Early colonizers started with murdering and stealing from Native Americans and enslaving Black people. So the torture and the terrorism started early on. And you can tell whenever Black people or indigenous people start to see any light at the end of the tunnel, domestic white terror came shortly after. We also see it through Karens and their angst towards Black people just minding their business. They can't take it. What if their epigenetics connection was through terrorism and violence?